Hello Earthlings, you're listening to the Environment and Science podcast, The Earth Show.
The topic we're talking about today is milk. And I know maybe that sounds a bit mundane to some of you, but I think milk is quite a topical issue. There's a big rise in plant milks because of the environmental issues and impact of dairy. We hear about all these plant milks all the time, but maybe we don't know that much about them. I certainly don't. I sometimes wonder, are they actually better or are they actually worse? And I never really tend to drink them just by themselves. I've never found a plant milk that I think I could just drink by itself, not in a hot chocolate or something. So I thought today what we could do is we could have a show on milk. We can talk about what different milks we have around, what is on our high street shelves, what we might get in a coffee shop. And then I will be joined by a very good friend of mine to do some milk reviews, some taste tests, and also to let you know the lowdown from my research as to what the environmental impact of these milks actually are and how they compare to dairy. You probably see on the news, oh, dairy is bad, but why is it actually bad? Well, let's start by setting the scene. I found some statistics as to how much milk we produce in the UK because it's a big industry. We're the 13th largest milk producers in the world. That was a report in September 2021. And we produce about 15 million metric tonnes every year from 1.9 million dairy cows. And if you think about it, it's something that most people have in their fridges, in their houses, it's a staple. And that's great. We get a lot from dairy milk. We have obviously the vitamins that it contains. It's high in protein and it includes actually all of the essential amino acids that we need as humans. So there's obviously multiple health benefits of milk. We've been drinking it for centuries and centuries. The main reason that people have a problem with cow's milk is because of its carbon footprint. That's just talking about emitting greenhouse gases, which basically cause global warming. I looked up how much carbon dioxide is released in producing milk, and I found that 3.15 kilograms of carbon dioxide are produced per 1 litre of milk production. And for you to visualise that, that's about the same as driving for 7.16 miles in the average car. Anyway, so it's a lot of carbon dioxide is the point, and that is something that is increasingly topical because of global warming. It's leading to global warming, and that's an issue, and that is basically the main issue we have with cows. There are three other kind of big issues with dairy production. One is land use. For you to have 1 glass of milk every single day of the year, that would require the equivalent of 2 tennis courts. And I think most people probably drink about 1 glass a day. If you're having cups of tea and you're having milk in it or cereal in the morning, you probably amount to that. And while 2 tennis courts probably isn't a lot per person when you think about it, if you think that the majority of our population probably have a lot of dairy in their diet, that's quite a lot. And the issues with this is obviously land needs clearing for this. And that affects habitats and biodiversity, which has a knock-on for all sorts of different things. It also uses a lot of water to have cows. That just requires a lot of energy, and especially in other countries of the world, especially where they experience lots of droughts, that's not a good thing because we just don't have enough water. Final thing is basically something called, now I'm not going to say this right, I don't think, but it's called eutrophication. Yeah, I don't know if I said that right. But eutrophication is basically the pollution of an ecosystem with excess nutrients. So people are feeding cows certain things, to help them stay healthy. And that is ultimately impacting the wider environment. And that has a knock-on effect for everything going on in the soil at a microorganism level. And that affects everything onwards from there. So there are 4 probably quite weighty reasons as to why there are problems with dairy milk. And that's why I thought I would try and do a show on some different milks today. But before we launch into the different milks, I will first introduce my wonderful guest, my very, very good friend from university. It's Mitch Marshall. Hello, Mitchell.
Hello. Thank you. It's good to be here. I feel as though I know more about milk already than I ever did before. As somebody who went through a phase of not drinking cow's milk and only drinking alternative milks, even then I never knew all of this stuff. So
Yeah.
Very interesting. I'm looking forward to refreshing my taste buds now.
I thought Mitch would be a good person to have on the show because, for a start, he's stranded at my house. And for the second reason, Mitch drinks coffee and I do not drink coffee. So that can give us an insight into what I think a lot of people use milk for. So I think it's worth having him here. So I will talk to Mitch in just a moment about milk, but I think that was quite a heavy introduction. So I think it's about time we had a bit of a music break. Welcome back to the Earth Show with me, Elysia, and my good friend Mitch, who we briefly met before the break. I don't think we properly introduced Mitch to you. Mitch obviously mentioned that he is a milk drinker and he has tried lots of different milks perhaps before. But let's just talk about generally. Is the environment something you think about much in your daily life? Is it something you care about or not?
Yeah, so I was vegetarian for a bit when I was younger. I found it quite difficult. I did it for environmental reasons. I didn't last particularly long, and nor was I very good at sticking at it while I was meant to be being vegetarian. But I'm definitely conscious of how much meat I eat, for example, how much dairy. So yeah, if I could find a milk alternative that I felt fulfilled my desire to drink a latte at least every day, if not more often, then that would be ideal.
So you mentioned you have drunk dairy alternatives before. Before we actually launch into our dairy alternatives, have you got any pre-existing thoughts or kind of theories as to what milk's good, what you like, what you don't like?
Yeah, well, it's worth setting out from the outset that Elysia and I's biggest milk-related disagreement is actually over which type of dairy milk. But even that's a minefield. I'm a full-fat man all the way myself. Elysia is semi-skimmed.
I'm green cat.
Oat milk was always my go-to. I tried almond milk recently for the first time. It was quite weird. I like almonds, but possibly not in that context, which I think is an interesting pointer that what you want in a milk and what you want everything else to taste of can be quite different things. There's something about the creamy blandness of normal milk, which I enjoy. And I think so far oat milk has come the closest to replicating that. But perhaps today we shall find out something new.
Yeah, I think milk, for me, I am a milk drinker. I do like cow's milk. And Mitch said I drink semi-skimmed milk is my preference. And I do think there's something about milk, I don't know for other dairy drinkers out there, but it's got quite a neutral taste. It just almost adds that consistency. Maybe it does have a strong taste if you'd never had it before, but we don't notice it. But when you change milks, I think you probably do notice it more because there is that kind of added taste of whatever milk you're having. But I think what we should do... Oh, actually, no. I was going to start by saying let's try the milks. Let's skip back. When thinking about the show, thought I should get the lowdown. So I went round the streets asking people what their opinions were, what their favourite type of milk was, and if they'd tried any dairy alternative. So here that is.
What's your favourite type of milk?
I would say probably oat milk.
Do you like any other alternatives?
I quite like almond milk, is also quite good. Yeah. But I'm also happy with cow's milk as well.
What's your milk of choice?
My favourite milk is whole milk.
Have you ever considered a milk alternative?
Many times. I've tried alternative milk, but I prefer whole.
What's your favourite type of milk?
I like strawberry milk, dairy as well.
Very nice. Have you ever considered a milk alternative?
I've tried soya milk. I didn't really have a problem with it, but I think I'll just stick to what I'm used to with normal dairy milk.
What's your favourite type of milk?
Oat milk.
Do you like any dairy alternative products?
I love going to Sausage and Green because they do nice chocolate bars and other dairy alternative products.
I like skimmed, super pasteurised Cravendale.
Have you ever considered a dairy alternative?
I have. I've tried to like it and I just don't.
I go for the milk with the green lid because that's just what I've grown up with. That's what's been in my household. I've never really tried any other milk, to be honest with you.
Do you think you'd consider trying a dairy alternative?
I'd consider trying it, yeah, definitely.
What's your favourite type of milk?
None. Don't drink milk.
What's your favourite kind of milk?
I'd have to say almond milk's my favourite type of milk.
What's your favourite type of milk?
My favourite type of milk is oat milk as like a dairy alternative. It's not the most healthy, I would say, because it's made from starch. So it's literally like drinking liquid glucose.
Oat milk? So, there were some of the views from the street. I wanted to do that because I wanted to see, what people thought and if people had kind of considered a lifestyle change. Because when people are thinking about environment and small switches they can make, something like changing the milk you drink is relatively small compared to, I guess, reconfiguring your house to have a different boiler and things like that, potentially a cheaper option. I think it was quite clear to me, I think Mitch probably found the same, that there was quite a breadth of what people thought, and there were quite a lot of strong views, I felt too.
I would love to live a day through the eyes of a man who doesn't like milk of any kind. Don't see how one can live in English society without that. Must be lots of black tea involved, I suppose.
Quite a lot of people don't. I think a lot of people drink milk, but I think there's also equally a number of people who really dislike it. And the guy I spoke to, he was great. He had a reason for not liking milk, which I think a lot of non-milk drinkers have. And his reason was because he had powdered milk growing up, and he said it was just horrible. And I've never had it, but I could maybe understand it might not be nice. Right. But moving on, I think it's about time we actually do what the show today was hoping to do, which is to review some alternatives. So for those of you who are considering maybe trying some or making a switch in your diet, let's start with some milk reviews. Before we started the show, I had my mum very kindly pour out different milks we have today and label them. So we're doing a blind review because I think that's our easiest way to be unbiased in the situation. 1/4 of adults in the UK now drink some dairy alternatives as part of their lifestyle, which I think was quite represented in the Vox Pop I collected.
I think alternative milk is like leading the vanguard of alternative kind of non-traditional meat and dairy lifestyle choices. I think it's like become quite cool in its own right.
Yes.
That's kind of what got me into it, I think. And the fact that it was like a new thing to do when you have a coffee, rather than it being presented as like a restriction to your life choices.
Well, people do talk about it like can enhance the taste of what you're drinking too. So let's join the trend.
Cheers.
I mean, I know what this is, do you? I think I do anyway.
Sorry, I'm taking quite a long time to... I think that's the one that's got rice in it.
Oh, I didn't think that. I thought, so for people who obviously can't see the visual of this, it's quite a yellowish milk we've just had, and I would say it's got a thick consistency.
Yeah, but it's got a watery taste, which is what makes me think, right, to me, it tastes like if you drank the water, God forbid, that you'd use to cook your rice, instead of just eating the rice.
I know what you mean. I think it's oat milk because it's got it's got that like when you make porridge with water kind of taste.
It smells oaty, you're right.
I've got to say, this milk that we've just drank now, we'll reveal what it is in a second, but it's actually, I don't mind it. How would you feel about drinking this straight, Mitch?
It's inoffensive, which I guess is good. I was saying earlier that I don't necessarily want my milk to have a really strong taste.
Yeah.
It's just a bit disappointing. To me, it's still not quite as thick as my full fat milk.
I must also say I did get the budget varieties of all of these, so I've not got the premium, which probably will make a difference.
Well, I do think that's a point worth noting, is that it can actually be very expensive in your day-to-day life to drink milk, so I think it's good that we're going for the budget options. I would say this would probably make quite a good milk to have in a coffee, because it's not kind of overbearing.
Yeah, and I would say likewise. I know you said it's watery, but I mean, this shows how subjective drinks are, but to me, it's got a thickness and a creaminess to it that works quite well for someone who's not a coffee drinker with a hot chocolate. If this is oat milk, which is what I think it is, I have oat milk hot chocolate many a time, and I enjoy it just as much as normal hot chocolate.
Well, should we find out?
Yeah, let's find out. This is so exciting. I feel like I'm on, even though I never watch it, Deal or No Deal. Should I do a drum roll and you can turn it over?
Okay. Ooh, soya! We both got it wrong.
No! That's crazy!
My dad's go-to dairy alternative milk is soya. So that's what I had in the house growing up. And I never liked it. That would explain my slight scepticism towards it just now.
I have to say, I am really impressed with the soya milk. Yeah, I didn't think that was soya milk. Let me tell you, I have some statistics here, because I love statistics, about soya milk. And actually, soya milk, of all the plant-based milks, something that I think a lot of people think about when they think of switching out dairy is, will they get the same health benefits? Will they get the same nutrition from it? And that is obviously a concern, because a lot of people have milk in their diet because it's a source of protein and calcium and everything. Soy milk actually has a really similar protein content to cow's milk. It's got the most similar makeup to cow's milk. So in terms of the most similar nutritional comparison, soya milk is actually a very good comparison if that's something that you would consider. It's got less than 1/3 of the greenhouse emissions of dairy, so that's a lot better. And it also uses a fraction of the water that is used for dairy production. And has the lowest, I can't say this word, but I'm going to try again, eutrophication, which was that where they're killing basically things in the soil, of all of the dairy alternatives. So it actually has got quite a lot going for it.
We've started with a good one. You've convinced me.
Yeah. It also has this other thing that I read about called nitrogen fixation that it helps with. And people have hailed it as a miracle plant for doing this. And basically what that does is it's converting nitrogen in the air into something that animals and plant life can use. So it's actually doing something good at the same time. Now completely talking about everything, the disadvantages, because everyone needs to know both sides of the story, is that soya or soy is not something that is grown easily in the UK because of our climate. It needs a warmer climate. And for that reason, a lot of it is grown in the Amazon. And for a statistic for you about the impact of that, so in 2020, 76,400 hectares of Amazon deforestation occurred just for soy crops, which is a lot. And obviously, that's a playoff because that's another environmental issue, deforestation, and that causes loss of biodiversity and helps, I think that's the wrong word, but doesn't help with global warming, I should say. So that is the thing to consider. But in terms of the fact how much less greenhouse gases it emits and how much less water it uses and how similar in composition it is, I don't think that's a bad choice to alternate.
That's true. Yeah, no, I'm actually converted. And what I would say is we're trying fairly small samples, but I have ended up draining my glass.
That's a very good sign.
It has either grown on me or stayed the same throughout, which is quite impressive because I do tend to consume milk in relatively large volumes, and therefore I don't want it to be something that tastes great kind of on that Pepsi test where on the first sip it's amazing, but kind of becomes sickly after a while.
Yeah.
And I think it's passed that test.
That's
so not a bad start at all.
Yeah, and we're also drinking them plain, which should help with our overall judgment, because obviously you don't taste them the same when they're in stuff. But let's move on to our next milk, because time is ticking and we've got to get through all these milks, because you guys need to know. And so do I. Okay, cheers.
Cheers.
It's a very loud clink, isn't it?
Well, you see, immediately you just know that's real milk. As a full fat milk fan, I suppose I should take my chance to diss the semi-skimness of this. However, as much as I was being nice about soy, it is nice to get that creamy flavour on your tongue.
I would actually argue it's creamy, but it's also got that watery freshness to it, milk. What's your opinion on the semi-skimmed?
I mean, it's really nice. I like milk. That's why I stopped drinking the alternatives. I quite like the alternatives, but if I can drink normal milk, probably will do. So, but I suspect you're about to tell me that it's got quite a lot of issues.
Well, we kind of confronted those issues at the beginning. There's various issues, and there's going to be issues with all the milks, but that's what we're doing today. It's not to convince you that you can't ever drink cow's milk again. It's just to give you the knowledge and a bit more of an idea, so you might see if you want to try something. Let's move on though over this. This again, I think one of the things that makes it obvious if it's a dairy milk or not a dairy milk from observation is just the colour. Dairy milk is very white in comparison to plant milks.
Yeah, I think I know what this is, but
I'm not sure about this.
Give it a go. Oh, now I'm not sure.
I've got to say, I don't know how I feel about that
I
one.
think it's nutty. I think it might be almond.
I think you're right.
Which, as I may have disclosed earlier in the show, I'm not massively enamoured with. And that was in a coffee.
Has it changed your mind?
No, drinking it neat, much like, vodka in a cocktail versus on its own, does not, improve the experience for me. No, I'm afraid this falls a bit flat.
It's very thin and the taste hits you quite late, I think, of the nut. But almond milk is actually one of the most popular dairy alternatives. Not so much now in the UK, we'll come to what is now, but especially in the US. And probably part of the reason for why it's so popular in the US is because 80% of the world's almond milk is produced in California, where it's really sunny. Almond milk, one thing that's great about it is it's the lowest greenhouse emissions of all milks. And also there's a potential it could be carbon neutral, which is basically when in the lifetime of the plant, it breathes in essentially the same amount of carbon dioxide as it gives out when you're maybe processing it or burning it or whatever. So that's quite promising in that sense. But like anything, there are some slight drawbacks of almond milk, and one of them is it requires so much water. I have here that for to make one Californian almond, it takes 4.5 litres of water.
Which is insane when you think how small an almond is.
Yeah, and then for one glass of water, it requires 1 glass of almond milk, not water. It requires 74 litres of water, which is more than a typical shower. So if you're drinking a glass of almond milk, you may as well have just had a shower. You're using that much water.
Well, I can't lie to you, Elysia. I enjoyed my shower this morning significantly more than I enjoyed drinking whatever that was. Which we should probably turn over the leaf and make sure that it is actually almond milk.
Oh, yeah. It's not going to be...
Yes,
oh, it is.
right.
Thank goodness. Otherwise, we would have been talking about something irrelevant there. But yeah, so basically, well, if you'd rather have a shower, I'd say have a shower, because it uses a lot of water, and that's an issue because... California, where all these almonds are grown, they have been experiencing severe droughts for many, many years now. And they're saying that, a contributing factor is they're growing all these almonds. Like anything, everything contributes. And also water just requires a lot of energy to process, and that's going to probably come in part from maybe fossil fuels or something. One of the other I don't want to sound too biased against almond milk because the greenhouse gas emissions thing is great, but one of the drawbacks that I found a rather miserable article about the effect on bees. Now, almonds themselves, as a plant, require bees to pollinate them, so they don't self-pollinate. And basically, I read an article saying in the winter of 2018 to 19, 50 billion bees were wiped out. And there are several reasons for this. Not all milk related, don't worry. They say pesticide exposure, disease, habitat loss. But environmentalists in the America area, in the California area, are saying one of the actual big reasons for a loss of loads of bees is because they're basically mechanicalizing them. Is that a word?
Give you that one, yeah.
Mechanicalizing bees. So they're basically, literally, bees are being brought to California in the masses just to pollinate all these almonds. And it's basically undermining their natural ecosystem. Why we don't want to kill bees is they're just very important for our planet, for our ecosystem, because they pollinate plants in a natural way, and it allows plants to keep growing, for us to have crops from them. We need bees if we want food, is the bottom line. And so the fact that almond milk is contributing to killing a lot of bees, I think maybe they need to rethink their processes. I don't reckon there's a way that you can not use bees.
No, the overall judgment on almond milk doesn't seem to be all milk and honey, does it?
Yeah. Shall we move on?
I think so. I think we've done quite enough injustice to almond milk
I feel
already.
It is. I want to emphasise with all milks, all of these plant-based milks, they all still have a much smaller environmental impact than cow's milk. Is the bottom line. So don't think of almond milk as the devil of all milks, because it's not that bad compared to dairy. It really isn't.
Unfortunately, my judgment is that it might be the worst of all possible worlds. However, if you like the taste of almond milk,
keep drinking,
go for it. Yeah. However, it hasn't really persuaded me to finish off the small sample that I was given. Let's move swiftly on.
Cheers.
Cheers. I know what that is straight away too, and I thought it would be. It looks so white. I thought that if it wasn't real milk, it had to be coconut milk or the coconut and rice milk combination, which I think we've got here today.
You know what? I would not have thought about that if you hadn't said coconut milk then.
But does this not look to you like the centre of a coconut?
Yeah, I don't look in coconuts often, to be honest. I guess.
That's nice. I like that.
I have to say it's really quite similar to cow's milk of all the alternatives.
Well, I guess coconuts are quite creamy and fatty in the way that normal milk is.
I want to try my normal milk.
I think what surprised me in a positive sense from this is it's not overly sweet, which was my concern, and which has generally put me off having coconut milk in coffee, for example. Is I like a bit of sweetness from the milk, but I don't want it to overwhelm the bitterness of the coffee.
Yeah.
And actually, this seems like it would work quite well for that purpose.
That's very good then. I have to say, I did buy unsweetened milk of all of these, and they do have sweetened varieties, which I think are quite popular. But yeah, I have to say, I think this is the most similar. I agree.
Yeah.
And I would be interested to see it to taste it in different drinks.
I suppose this comes back to our bias as people who both like dairy milk.
Yes.
Maybe people who are looking for an alternative, it's because more than anything they don't like the taste of normal milk, but they want a coffee that isn't black, or they want something to put on their cereal. So. Yeah.
I have to say, this is an odd milk. Should we turn it over to check actually in advance?
Yeah, we were right.
Okay, so this is coconut and rice milk. I don't know if that's a widespread thing. This is from Lidl, this coconut and rice milk. I was looking for either coconut or rice milk, but they only had coconut and rice milk, which does work well, but it meant that when I was finding some statistics, that I couldn't really find a statistic for coconut and rice milk together. So I'll just tell you a couple of things about them separately. Coconut milk has generally got quite a good review environmentally, because it doesn't require deforestation, because I guess it's like berries. You're just picking a coconut, aren't you? And the tree stays where it is. They don't require a lot of water, which I found surprising because I thought they're full of water. The one thing I found about coconut milk that's not so good, and I think is probably why, if you are considering coconut milk, you should look on packaging where it comes from. In Thailand, they use monkeys to pick their coconuts. And there's an ethical issue with getting monkeys to, forcing them to pick coconuts. And it's done in very cruel conditions. And that article I read was talking about monkeys in Thailand. I don't know if that is something that is common across other countries too, or if it has been cracked down on, but this article was only written last year, so it's obviously still an ongoing thing, and it might be something that you want to consider when looking at a label. But rice milk, what do you think the impacts of rice milk are?
I would have thought reasonably minimal, given that rice is something we produce masses of in the world anyway.
Yeah.
I do feel as though rice production might be quite water heavy, intense.
It does use a fair amount of water, actually. I have that written down. Nowhere near as much of almond, I don't know how to say it. But it's only 43% of cow's milk, so it's less than half. It's still quite a high amount, you're right. But they do use a lot less land for rice crops. So in terms of land efficiency, quite good. Rice milk does have the largest greenhouse gas emissions of all of the plant-based milks. But it is still less than cow's milk significantly, I'd like to say and make clear. But yeah, so rice milk actually is I would say pretty middle of the ground in terms of comparing the plant milks.
I have to say, I think the main notes that I was enjoying in this, in an Epicurean sense, were the coconut really rather than the rice. So, in fact, I would say the rice was largely masked by the coconut. So perhaps I'll stick to that.
I don't know if the rice adds like a consistency to it, because I think coconut water can be quite thin.
Kind of gives a more savoury edge. Whereas, as I say, I pictured that coconut milk would be a lot sweeter. Yeah, maybe the jury's out a little bit there, but definitely something I would try again.
Yeah, I would definitely try this again too. And I would encourage people to, if you're curious by this, do try it, but also try the coconut and rice milk separately too, because I think it would be an interesting comparison to make. Okay, right. We're going to take another very quick break, and then we will review the final 2 milks. And we can give our overall verdict, I think, then, on what we prefer. It's all about preference with this kind of thing. So we will see you shortly. Hello and welcome back to the Earth Show. I'm Elysia and I'm here today with my good friend Mitch.
Hello.
We've been trying lots of dairy alternatives and dairy milks to give you an honest comparison of what we like the taste of and to think about the environmental impact of them all, because I know it can be a bit confusing and we don't necessarily know if we're doing the right thing sometimes. So far we have tried 4 different milks. We've tried almond milk, soya milk, rice and coconut milk, slightly rogue one, and just normal semi-skimmed dairy milk. And our lowdown so far is actually we were both pleasantly surprised by the soya milk. I think it's safe to say.
I passed the blind part of the taste test in the sense that it was not what we were expecting it to be.
No, exactly. We both, I thought it was oat milk. What did you think it was?
I can't remember, but I didn't think it was soy milk.
No, it was a pleasant surprise, and the environmental statistics looked quite good for soy milk generally. Almond milk, we were both unimpressed, but this is no judgment if you like almond milk. Drink what you like. This is just our opinions.
Yeah, we are working off a small sample size here, aren't we?
Yeah, there's 2 people here, and we both like dairy milk. So if you're not a dairy milk drinker, like Mitch was pointing out before, these things you might well prefer a lot. Coconut and rice milk, I also really liked. You liked it too, Mitch.
Yeah, I did. I might actually go away and try both of those separately now, I think.
So we have 2 milks left today before we close the show, which I think we need to try.
This one, unless I've lost my sense of smell in the last 5 minutes, has quite a neutral smell.
Oh my gosh.
That's oat milk, isn't it?
That's so oat milk.
Yeah. Which is interesting because I like oat milk. I've drunk it quite a bit. I've had it on cereal and in coffee. Quite a lot of times down the years. And I never really associated it with being particularly sweet. But actually, by comparison to some of the other ones we've tried today, it almost feels a bit sickly.
You know what? I'm actually going to check if we've got a sweetened version or not. It says subtly sweet taste on the bottle.
It's got a lot of sugar in it.
Is that added, or is it just natural?
Doesn't say so.
You know what though? Going back to the beginning, I went into Gales and I chatted to a very nice guy in there who gave me his honest milk review as a bit of a barista. And he said he liked oat milk, if you remember, if anyone heard the Vox Pop earlier. But he did mention the sweetness.
Yeah, I've really enjoyed that, I have to say. I've not had oat milk for a while because I've gone back to having dairy again. But that's really reminded me why I had oat milk. It reminds me of eating cereal.
Yeah, it
almost like
exactly
it's,
does.
but the sweetness is almost like it's had the cereal in it already. So I think maybe when I was having it on cereal before, I didn't quite realise what was the cereal and what was the taste of the oat milk. But it's good. I'm slightly disappointed by its protein content there.
Yeah, well, like I said earlier on in the show, the only one that kind of rivals dairy for its protein content is soya milk, which has the most similar makeup. But yeah, it is really sweet and it does taste like cereal milk. If you don't like sweetness at all, you probably won't like oat milk because it does have a sweet kick to it. It's almost one though that is still fairly nice to drink just straight. Like, it almost reminds me of drinking a milkshake or something because it's got that sweetness.
Yeah, very true.
So it goes. Right, oat milk. What's the lowdown with, as in how good for us is it or good for our planet? Well, oat milk is actually the most popular in the country. In our country, not in other countries. But it's just boomed massively. So 5 years ago, people didn't really even know of oat milk. And it has just, since, to kind of illustrate how popular it's become, between 2019 and 2020, UK sales of oat milk increased by over 100%, which is giant. And it's been a milk that has just continued to gain popularity. It's often the one that you see when you're in a coffee shop. I think it's a barista's choice often. Oat milk is an option. I know I'm not a coffee drinker, but I know that I think probably one of my first encounters with oat milk was at a coffee shop where I was recommended it for my hot chocolate because of its earthy taste, which I was told would bring out the hot chocolate. And it kind of did.
Yeah, that sounds lovely.
So it is a popular milk.
I would say when it froths up for coffee, it doesn't quite have the same intensity of texture as a nice dairy milk. But it's a passable alternative. I drank it for quite a long time.
One of the really good things about oat milk, which I haven't mentioned about the other milks, is the fact that oats are something that can be easily grown in the UK. Now, with almonds, they need warm environments. That's why a lot of them are grown in California. Same for soy. Coconuts obviously don't grow naturally in the UK. But oats are something that can be grown in the UK and easily. And the really good thing about that is that, if we are replacing dairy, obviously it's, we've got all these dairy farmers. If we are cutting down on herds, well, it's another industry that they can go into, I guess. So that's one positive from that sense. But most importantly, in an environmental context, it's the fact that if we are flying almond milk, soy milk from all across the world, or even just the beans for it to be manufactured in the UK, that's got a big carbon footprint associated with it because whether they're travelling by plane or boat or whatever, there's pollution involved with that. Whereas if it's just produced in the UK, that is much better for our carbon footprint. And if you are considering changing your milk or anything like that, and you're thinking, I want to reduce my carbon footprint, well, you're much more likely to successfully if you're eating stuff from home. So that's really good. It does use the most land of all dairy alternatives. But this being said, it's less than 10% of dairy still. But you're never going to achieve perfection, I think, is something we can conclude from all these milks. Should we try the final milk?
Yeah, let's do it. I'm milked out. Well, not quite.
My favourite guy in the shop who doesn't drink milk did warn me not to milk this show, so you look confused.
Yeah, partly because I realised I've forgotten what the other milk was that we were meant to be having. However, this tastes like real milk.
I've got to say, normally in my household we have semi-skimmed milk and skimmed milk. Normally if someone gives me skimmed milk, I'm like, oh, I don't like skimmed milk, I want semi-skimmed milk. But I can't taste the difference. I don't know if it's because we've had all these other milks.
I think, though, drinking this on the back of drinking lots of things that aren't real milk at all, you know, I would occasionally argue that skim milk is so skimmed to the point that it's no longer passable as milk. But I think what this has showed us is it does have more in common with milk than any of the alternatives do, surprisingly enough.
Yeah, well, based on the fact I cannot tell the difference between this milk and the other one now, I think does tell us that actually
I think you
milk
might be getting
is
milk fatigue in that case.
Don't taste test milk, guys. It's dangerous.
It's hard work, honestly.
You know what? I feel my taste buds are tired out, which is good because we've now tried all of the milks. I thought about when I was getting these milks, they all come in these things called Tetra Packs. And I was concerned that these aren't very easy to recycle. And so I looked it up. What was the comparison in recycling a Tetra Pak from, you know, a standard plastic milk container that you get in the supermarket? And we can recycle those Tetra Packs, and actually the information I read was saying it had a similar impact to the plastic. Another thing about the plant milks is they do last a lot longer than traditional cow's milk.
Very true.
I think to round off all of our taste tests there, the blanket fact is that all of them have a smaller environmental impact than dairy milk. So if you are wanting to make a change in your lifestyle because you maybe the environment is something you're concerned about, people change different things in their lifestyle, but milk is something that some people might consider changing. And even not saying you're taking dairy milk out of your diet completely, but maybe just trying a dairy alternative a couple of times a week could help make a small impact. But that doesn't mean that dairy alternatives don't have any environmental issues associated with them too, because as we talked about today, they kind of all have their advantages and disadvantages, and good things about them and not so good things about them, like anything in life. I guess one thing I talked about before was the fact that not all of these milks come from the UK. So I did look up for us what plant-based milks come from the UK. So if you are wondering about trying a different milk and what may or may not have a smaller impact, and drinking one from the UK may just be a little help. So there are a few brands of plant-based milk that are from the UK. To summarise with just the ones that are grown in the UK, actually there aren't loads and loads, but one of them that is completely grown in the UK, as far as I'm aware anyway, is called Glebe Farm or Glebe Farm, and they produce oat milk. Another one that produces oat milk from the UK mainly, but also from Northern Europe, is Minor Figures oat milk. So if you're looking out for a milk that is produced in the UK that is a dairy alternative, I would definitely recommend checking out the Glebe Farm or Glebe, Glebe, or the Minor Figures oat milk. At the same time, if they are more expensive options for you, changing any milk in your diet, even if it is from abroad, is still going to make a positive difference. So the milks I bought today, I didn't look where they were from, to be completely honest. I bought the cheapest ones. I think the soy milk was 59p from Lidl, which I actually thought was quite good. I think that's cheaper than dairy milk anyway. Also, another thing with milk is we're taking a very kind of one-way approach. We're just talking about drinking milk, but milk is used in different things. I spoke to some lovely people in Sostron Green who you heard on the Vox Pop earlier, who were telling me about the really nice almond milk chocolate they have. So the reality is, you know, maybe you don't want to change your milk, but maybe you might try another dairy alternative in a different thing in your life, whether that's vegan cheese, though that's not often popular, or a bit of vegan chocolate every now and again. Who knows?
I was not a fan of almond milk, but I am game for trying almond milk chocolate.
Maybe I'll have to take you to Sostron Green tomorrow to try a bit of that then.
If you're paying.
I was going to say we've talked about milk a lot. It is a milk episode. I want to give you just a couple of other things. If you are thinking to yourself, I really like dairy milk, I really care about the environment, I want to make a difference, I just don't think I can take dairy milk out of my my diet is important to me, I need it for health reasons, whatever reason, I love dairy milk. It's the one thing I can't compromise on. There is a bit of hope. So one of the problems with cows, I said, they release loads and loads of methane. But there have been recent studies, which some of you may have seen on the news, that actually you can reduce how much methane or how much greenhouse gases a cow emits by feeding it seaweed. An Australian variety of red seaweed, and this has also been backed up by studies in the USA, has been found to reduce a cow's methane emissions by 80%, which is a massive, massive figure and makes it not look so bad in that sense anyway compared to plant-based alternatives.
That's almost as surprising as the revelation that I enjoy coconut and oat milk. Stunning.
Exactly. So you know what? There is some hope for people who just don't think they can take it out. Obviously, the people with things like nut allergies, please don't drink nut milk thinking you're going to save the planet. You've got to look after yourself, obviously. If you are someone who's thinking about, I mentioned packaging before, if you're someone who's thinking about the packaging issues of these plant-based milks, local companies are now selling oat milk in glass bottles, so we can get it delivered. So if you're wanting a double whammy, you're like, let's reduce my carbon footprint twofold by not having the plastic and not having a dairy milk, you can do that. But I think we've had a lot of chatting today, and I fed you a lot of information in between our milk reviews, which is probably enough for today's show. I hope you know a little bit more about milk and that you feel a little bit more educated when you're in the supermarket and you're faced with all these milks and thinking, what should I pick? I would definitely encourage you to try because, you know, as we've shown today from our taste test, we've been pleasantly surprised by quite a few. And just changing, you know, some milk out once a week could actually make a real difference. So it's worth, if you have the time and the energy anyway, experimenting and trying a few milks like we have today. It's actually been quite fun, I'd say. I've enjoyed it, and I feel I know a lot more about my personal dairy alternative preferences. So I think all that's left to say now is to thank Mitch for coming. You've been a wonderful guest, and I think probably all the listeners can agree that you've had some excellent input and you've given very thorough reviews, which have been very useful.
Thank you.
Thank you all so much for listening to today's episode of The Earth Show. Your support really does mean so much, and I'd be so grateful if you could leave a review, a rating, a comment if you enjoyed listening today. And don't forget to follow or subscribe to our podcast on here and follow at @theearth_show for more content on Instagram as well. And if you'd like to get in touch, I'd love to hear from you on info.theearthshow@gmail.com. But in the meantime, all that's left to say is don't forget to share this podcast with your friends if you've enjoyed it today. And from me, a massive thank you for listening and have a wonderful week. Speak to you soon.